Good morning.
Hello, welcome to Beyond the News. I am Jim Grant, and if our thing was just interrupted, that's because one of my YouTube things has just loaded up correctly. Woohoo! So coming up on today's show, we're going to be looking at this is an article from the Telegraph. Judge allows police to break down woman's door for enforced caesarean. Then we've got from The Guardian, Edwardian house at heart of long simmering sex scandal. We've got from the Daily Mail, we've got an article, it's from Breitbart, Blackmail and Silent Handovers, how Cameron allows UK powers to keep slipping to Brussels. Yeah, I'm sure it's just an accident. There's the Daily Mail article. Leon Britton is quizzed over teen rape claim. Ex-Home Secretary accused of attacking a student in his flat. That's the one that I believe lost those files, wasn't it? Or didn't do anything about it. Yeah. Strange that. Right, then we've got from The Independent. Major study reveals true scale of abuse in children living in care. And our videos this week will be Denis Kucinich, used to be a Democratic representative, I believe. Is it Senator or Congress? I forget now. He was over in Sweden and he gave a speech that I really liked, so I thought I'd play that for you. And then we've also got study reveals secret bailouts to Canadian banks. Oh, it's Canadian banks. Why should we care about that in Britain? Well, it's part of a systemic sucking of the wealth from the Western world, and it goes. The Bank of England, the Fed and the Canada, they're all sort of intertwined with the money flows and things like that. So I wanted to give you an example of that. So let's begin then. Sexual abuse of children. There's been a lot of this in the show recently, but I think it's important to point it out that you're dealing with people at upper echelons of government and corporations who seem to have a great deal of lack of empathy, and there's quite a lot of them, and they do each other favours, and files go missing. And the whole point of it on this show is if they're willing to, that's what we call a conspiracy, and it's very real. And if they're willing to conspire on the abuse of children, what else are they conspiring about? You know, the government wouldn't do that. Well, that's something I heard a few years ago. What do you say now? You know, now all this stuff's come out recently. So this has been recorded on the 9th of July. It'll be going out later on. In July, or possibly by now we might even be into early September, because of course we take a break for August. So sexual abuse of children in state care endemic in Victoria. Leaked documents reveal 98 alleged rapes, 96 reports of indecent assault and 73 alleged incidents of exploitation over a year. And that is from The Guardian, Friday the 4th. And when it says Victoria, I do believe that is in Australia, so it's not like the Victoria in London, I do believe. Sexual abuse in Victoria's out-of-home care system has been described as endemic after leaked documents revealed hundreds of reports of alleged rape, indecent assault and exploitation of minors in the year to March. Internal documents reveal a total of 342 critical incidents of a sexual nature reported in the state's child protection system. So, you know, that's in Australia. I just wanted to show that this is, you know, not contained within Britain. This is an establishment thing, okay? The new world order, okay? And I don't really want to go into the nastiness of it. I don't enjoy reading that sort of stuff or talking about it. It's not. You can read the article for yourselves. They're all at beyondthenews.co.uk. Click news, and I've got news from all around the world. It's like a very cheap blog type thing, well, free actually, and it looks cheap, and it is cheap. It's free. But I do this on a shoestring, but it's all about the content, isn't it? Not about the presentation. We've had enough of the Tony Blair style of government, haven't we, where it's all spin and no content. It's the exact opposite on this show. Good content and no presentation of any kind. I waffle, I'm useless with the technology, and our website designer Gary Owen does a fantastic job, and I'm sure I don't utilise all the stuff that he's put on the site for me, and I don't update as much as I like, but that's because I study this stuff, you know, and no one's ever given me a penny for this show. I do it because I really do want to make the world a better place. The Telegraph. Judge allows police to break down woman's door for enforced caesarean. Pregnant woman has an irrational fear of hospitals. Is it irrational? Is it irrational? I mean, that's where all the superbugs are, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting that they reuse the word irrational. I mean, you could say a pregnant woman has a fear of hospitals, that'd be fair enough. But is it irrational? Who are they to say what's rational and irrational? But could die in childbirth. Her third child was delivered using barbecue tongs and was found severely malnourished. So, by Keith Perry, 7th of July 2014, a judge has allowed police break down the door of a pregnant woman and take her for an enforced caesarean under sedation because she could die in childbirth but refuses to go to hospital. The woman, who has an extreme phobia of hospitals, gave birth to the third of her 5 children at home, allegedly using barbecue tongs in delivery, and fed the child on instant soup for the first week of his life. In just over 10 years, the woman, referred to only as Dee Dee, had 3 caesarean deliveries and 2 concealed pregnancies. All of the woman's 5 children were taken into care when they were young babies, and doctors feared she might die giving birth to her 6th, the High Court said. So this is the constant yin and the yang. We've got, bringing us on to another article. We've got other articles about, let's look at how you've got abuse in care homes and the system and that sort of stuff, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you've got parents that do sound, a bit nuts, and who's to say if her fear of hospital is irrational, though, because there are a lot of bugs and things like that, but I think it's fair to say that feeding a child instant soup for the first week is not ideal either. So you've got that constant yin and the yang of probably some children are better off in the system. I mean, I've never met this woman, I don't want to pass judgment, but, probably are. And but then you've got a system which is also extremely corrupt and terrible. So, what do we do about it? Well, that's the yin and the yang. That's where deciding, I'm not an anarchist. We do need a government. I just think it needs to intrude into people's lives as little as possible. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that article to your attention. Edwardian House, at the heart of a long-simmering sex scandal, calls for full inquiry as allegations of 1980s abuse by powerful paedophile network in London resurface. Saturday, 5th of July 2014. And this is by Daniel Boffey, The Guardian. And it reads, the handsome Edwardian house that was formerly Elm Guest House, near Barnes in southwest London, was long ago converted into flats. Its 8 guest rooms were rearranged into 2-bedroom apartments, each worth today more than £500,000. Estate agents say that among the property's greatest attraction are its transport links. Some 30 years ago, the convenient location was similarly appealing. It is just over Hammersmith Bridge. It is well served by underground and bus services and by British Rail, and is near the M4, A3, A4 and A40, said a newsletter published in 1982 by a Tory fringe organisation, the Conservative Group for Homosexual Equality. Facilities include a sauna, solarium and video studio. 2 months later, Elm Guest House was raided by police, and its owners, Haroon and Carol Kazir, were convicted at the Old Bailey of running a brothel. The Kazirs had allowed a small industry to bloom in their establishment. Male prostitutes had found it a convenient place to take clients, and it was probably perceived as a safe retreat for gay men in a society which, despite the legalisation of homosexual acts in 1967, was still profoundly homophobic. After Carol Kazir's suicide in 1990, that was perhaps how some would have liked the story of Elm Guest House to have ended. Today, however, the suburban house is at the heart of a simmering scandal threatening to boil over and take with it the reputations of a swath of the political class of the 1970s and 1980s. In 2012, Tom Watson, the Labour MP who played a key role in exposing the phone hacking scandal at the News of the World, stood up in Parliament to ask the Prime Minister to ensure a dossier of information used in 1992 to convict a notorious paedophile called Peter Wrighton was examined thoroughly. And we played that on this show at the time. That's how long we've been going now. Just to plug this show a little bit. We do the news articles that I've covered on this show have come into the mainstream sometimes a month later, sometimes 2 years later. And not all of them have. but I'm not here for ego reasons. Oh, I'm great, listen to me. No, I'm here because the stuff that I cover it because I think it's important. I cover it because it's admitted. I cover it because it's in the mainstream, and I cover it because it's not covered enough, and it's really important. I thought it was very important that a Labour MP directly had a word with David Cameron at Prime Minister's Questions Times and told him about a powerful paedophile network linked to Westminster, and that nothing happened about it. I thought that was important, and 2 years later it now seems other people seem to agree with me. So I don't get any money from this in any way, this show. It matters not whether I have 1 or 1,000 listeners. My interviews with Roger Hayes on YouTube have gone, for several thousand, which is nice. I'm here because I genuinely want people to know what I know, because that way we can start to get an understanding of the problem that we face and not get depressed about it, but know your enemy, as Sun Tzu said, and then we can overturn them and build a better world. And that's what this show is all about. So, Watson said he believed the file, if it still existed, would prove some evidence of a powerful paedophile network linked to Parliament and Number 10. Watson's comments in part prompted the Metropolitan Police to set up Operation Fernbridge. Claims have since materialised about boys from Grafton Close Children's Home in Hounslow, West London, being taken to Elm Guesthouse, piled with alcohol and abused. So let me just make it clear, I've got nothing against gays at all. But abusing children, gay or straight, I think is wrong, and that's why I'm reading this article. So this is not an anti-gay thing, and it's from The Guardian as well. It's not an anti-gay thing, it's an anti-paedophile thing, okay? And all the gay people I know seem really cool to me, and I like them. But I never went to Elm's Guesthouse. Cyril Smith, the late Liberal MP, accused since his death in 2010 of being an child abuser, is said to have regularly visited the property. Other names, some household names, swirl around the internet. Back in 1983, Geoffrey Dickens, a Tory MP, had got wind of something of this. He compiled a dossier telling his family it was explosive and would blow the lid on powerful and famous child abusers. The dossier was handed over to the then Home Secretary Leon Britton, remember that name for our next article, who acknowledged receipt in a letter and suggested the police had been informed. In general terms, the view of the Director of Public Prosecutions is that 2 of the letters you forwarded could form the basis for inquiries by the police, and they are now being passed to the appropriate authorities, he wrote. Nothing was heard of the Dickens dossier again. Surprise, surprise! Last year, after further questions by Watson, the Home Office searched for Dickens' files. It couldn't find them. Pressed last week, the Prime Minister ordered another look. I've asked the Permanent Secretary at the Home Office to do everything he can do to find answers to all these questions and to make sure we can assure people about these events. Didn't do that when Tom Watson asked him in 2012, but, I'm sure David Cameron's a good guy. Yet, as the Observer reveals today, the Dickens dossier was just one of 114 potentially relevant files found to be missing by officials when they did their initial search. Funny that. And you've got to ask yourself, if those files go missing on something as horrific as that, what other files go missing about other horrific things that are being done by people who are paid wages by the taxpayer? The public are going to think something fishy is going on, and who could blame them? Yeah, said Simon Danczuk, the Labour MP who outed Smith as a child abuser. The MP for Rochdale Smith's old constituency, he believes that there must be a Hillsborough-style inquiry into the abuse scandal. How about trials? How about the old-fashioned way of, what is this with politicians and bankers and inquiries? We need an inquiry. No, if you think you've broken the law and paedophilia is breaking the law, how about a good old-fashioned trial where evidence is heard from both sides and you make a conviction or you let them free? How about an old-fashioned trial for these people, eh? Because I'll tell you what, a word of warning to humanity. If all you have is an inquiry with no teeth, well, next generations of paedophiles are going to think to themselves, well, I'll tell you what, we'll do it, and if we get caught, we can make the files disappear, and if we still get caught again, and it's found that we're the ones that are involved, and we're the ones involved in making the files disappear again, all we have is an inquiry, really, at the end of the day, and we'll just, an inquiry cannot jail people, can it? And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to do it again. So, since outing Smith, I've had senior police officers coming forward and others who want to share their experience of investigating these sorts of matters, he said, but they tell me that they feel they have to be cautious about what they say for fear of losing their pensions. Okay, so who has the power to cancel someone's pensions? Yeah? The same sort of people that have the ability to make 114 files go away? We have a deep problem, people. We have a deep, deep problem. He told me that he had signed one told me that he had signed a gagging order. Nutritious cornerstone of any free press and democracy. I think an overarching inquiry would provide the space for people to come forward and share the information that they have on what they investigated and what they found. And you think about the difference between this and how the celebrity paedophiles were treated. Not to say that they didn't get what they deserve. I'm just saying, look at the difference here. They should all be tried. They should all be up before a judge. I'm not saying they're all guilty, because everyone has the right of habeas corpus, innocent till proven guilty, but they should be put before a jury of their peers and evidence. They should neither be let scot-free with an inquiry, neither should they be Guantanamo style found guilty without trial. I'm advocating good old-fashioned justice here. On Saturday, the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, added her voice to those calling on Cameron to do more, whatever the consequences for the reputation of politicians. The Prime Minister should ensure that the action now taken by the Home Office amounts to a proper investigation into what happened, and also that Theresa May publish the full review conducted in 2013, Cooper said. We need assurance that the police have been given full information and are now investigating. Blah, 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 blah. Operation Fernbridge, staffed by 7 detectives, trundles on, of course, but the jury is out on whether the secrets of Elm Guest House will ever be fully aired. The questions a Hillsborough-style inquiry into organised child abuse would need to answer. What did Leon Britton do with the dossier of allegations compiled by Tory MP Geoffrey Dickens? That's question number 1. Question number 2. Why did the police not investigate the claims contained within the Dickens dossier? Question number 3. Did the Home Office fund the paedophile information exchange, and if so, which minister approved it and why? Number 4. What happened to the 114 documents relating to organised child abuse that the Home Office admits that is either destroyed or lost? 5. Was the late Cyril Smith MP part of a network of high-ranking politicians and officials working in the 1970s and 80s to cover up child abuse? And since then, number 6, because remember this article was written on the Saturday, it turns out, we had another article we covered on the show before, that Geoffrey Dickens also handed it over to the DPP, and nothing was done about it then. So you've got, I'm sorry, I'm going to call it for what it is. That's a cover-up. I don't know who, but for the Home Secretary, I mean, this isn't like someone's handed them evidence that someone somewhere, might have built a flat without planning permission. This is a lot of evidence of children being seriously abused given to the Home Secretary and the DPP directly by an MP and an acknowledgement letter. I'm sorry, when nothing's done for 30 years, that's a cover-up. And when all the files go missing, I'm sorry, that's a cover-up, in my opinion. We have got a serious problem in this country. And you'll know that if nothing really gets done, you'll know it's probably a good bet still going on. So remember that name, Leon Britton, as we bring up our next article. Leon Britton is quizzed over teen rape claim. Ex-Home Secretary accused of attacking student in his flat. Former Home Secretary questioned by police over claims he raped student. Assault alleged to have taken place at Britton's central London flat in 1967. Britton, who would have been in his late 20s, said to strongly deny claim. Scotland Yard confirmed man in his 70s was interviewed under caution. It comes as a Labour peer is investigated over sex attacks on children. And that's by Ian Gallagher and Simon Walters on the 6th of July 2014. Former Home Secretary Leon Britton has been questioned by police over claims he raped a 19-year-old student. So again, it's a claim, and everyone has the right to be innocent until proven guilty. So, what was that other story that they were talking about, where it was the Labour MP? Let's go to beyondthenews.co.uk, because I remember reading about that, and I should have queued it up beforehand, but I haven't. So here we go. The headline is Labour Lords sex attacks on... Oh, the link is wrong. Sorry about that. Sometimes the link goes a little bit wrong on beyondthenews.co.uk, and what I can do though is I can copy and paste that into Google. So we can, or start page if you want to use that, and that'll bring the article up. So if ever there's a wrong link or a dead link on my site, that's what you do. Okay. Doesn't seem to bring it up. Oh well, right. Let's skip that then. Major study reveals true scale of abuse of children living in care. This is The Independent, and this is Sunday the 6th of July. Shocking findings spark calls by campaigners for better monitoring. 1 in every 100 children living in care is abused every year in Britain, according to the most comprehensive study conducted into the issue. The research by York University and the NSPCC is the first of its kind to uncover and analyse local authority records on abuse in foster and residential care. So, just another little thing to consider. And we are now going to break up our show, and we're going to come back with more articles at the end, but now we're going to come and do our video section. So this is study reveals secret bailouts to Canadian banks. This was at a big press conference over in Canada, and it's important, I'm not going to play it all, but it's important to understand that when it comes, it's not just the paedophiles in which we are lied to, it is the way finance works. And I know this is Canadian, but the system of subterfuge is similar worldwide, and the financial systems are interconnected.
The conventional narrative about the performance of Canada's big banks during the financial crisis.
And also, why it's relevant for Britain is because our head of the Bank of England at the moment came from, I think he is Canadian, isn't he? I could probably Google that and double check. Bank of England boss, Canadian. Mark Carney. He was previously the governor of the Bank of Canada, and he took over last year. So this is important to Britain because this was the guy that was overseeing all of this, I believe. He was previously the governor of the Bank of Canada. So he would have been, I don't know if he's overseeing it or anything like that, but he's involved, put it that way. Well, how could he not be? Well, put it this way. Well, you know what I'm saying, don't you?
It goes as follows. While American banks bet heavily on subprime real estate and had extensive shadow bank holdings, Canadian banks did not. Due to Canada's more conservative banking culture and better regulation, Canadian banks, the story goes, didn't need a bailout. The bank's strength allowed them to come through the crisis with relative ease, needing only liquidity support from the government. However, the details of exactly how much each Canadian bank received, when they received it, and what they put up as collateral has remained locked away at CMHC and the Bank of Canada. Not even access to information requests have been able to free this information. Today, the CCPA is publishing a study by David McDonald, The Big Bank's Big Secret, which provides the first public estimates of the emergency funds taken by Canadian banks from CMHC, the Bank of Canada, and the U.S. Federal Reserve. The report bases its estimates on publicly available data from CMHC, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Bank of Canada, as well as quarterly reports from the banks themselves. The report was subjected to external review by 4 economists. I'll now turn it over to the report's author, David MacDonald.
Thanks, Bruce. I think a lot of Canadians would be surprised to learn that Canada's banks drew support from not one country but 2 during the financial crisis, Canada and the US. And I think a lot of Canadians would be surprised to learn that Canada's Big 5 banks drew on support for not a short period of time, but an extended one from October 2008 through through June 2010. In fact, over the 1.5-year period the Canadian banks drew that support, they drew it much longer than the length of the crisis itself. And I think a lot of Canadians would be surprised to learn the extent of the support received by Canadian banks. In the report that we're publishing today, I estimate that at peak, Canadian banks received $114 billion worth of support. This figure is equivalent to 7% of Canada's GDP, or the size of Canada's economy, in 2009. Put another way, the support was worth $3,400 for every man, woman, and child in the country. For comparison's sake, the bank support programs were worth approximately 10 times more than the auto bailout programs, for which Canadians put up $14 billion and for which the loan portion has been repaid. During the financial crisis, Canadian banks drew support from not 1, not 2, but 3 separate programs in Canada and the US. The first was from the US Federal Reserve, from which they took loans worth at peak $33 billion converted to Canadian dollars. Second is loans from the Bank of Canada, from which they took $41 billion at peak. And third, CMHC purchased $69 billion worth of mortgages from the banks over the support period. As you can see from the chart on my left, the 3 largest recipients of aid were Scotiabank, Royal Bank, and TD Bank, receiving an estimated $25 to $26 billion at peak. CIBC received somewhat less money at $21 billion at peak. And the Bank of Montreal, for its part, received an estimated $17 billion at peak. While the bank values cluster around $20 to $25 billion, the size of the banks is in fact quite different. Royal Bank, for instance, is Canada's biggest bank, and in fact, the biggest publicly traded company in the country. Whereas, for comparison's sake, the Bank of Montreal is about 1/3 the size of Royal. And so when we look at the amount of aid received, it's important to adjust those figures for the size of the banks. And I think there it's really where we see the depth of the crisis for Canadian banks. On the relative chart to my right, we can see that 3 banks, Scotiabank, Bank of Montreal, and CIBC, at some point during the financial crisis, received aid worth more than the value of the companies themselves. Put another way, each of these 3 banks, at some point, it would have been less expensive to have purchased every single one of the shares in those banks rather than provide them with the support that they received.
So why did they? Well, banks and politicians who ultimately it was the politicians' decision to give all the banks the money. Well, they meet regularly at Bilderberg, don't they? I'm sure it's just a coincidence. If you think otherwise, you're a conspiracy theorist.
And so, while our politicians were trumpeting the soundness of the Canadian banking system on the global stage, 3 of Canada's banks were at some point underwater, relying on government support programs to get by. CIBC, in particular, received an estimated peak 1.5 times the value of the company, and I estimate that for the first 3 months of 2009, it spent the better part of that period underwater. The federal government claims that it was providing liquidity support and acting as a backstop. However, the details released today And with the details released today, it looks a lot more like a bailout to me. Whatever we call it, it's clear that the support provided for Canadian banks was much more substantial than Canadians were led to believe. It is worth noting over the aid period that Canada's banks declared $27 billion in profits between them. The CEOs of each of these banks were among the highest paid CEOs in the country. And finally, between 2008 and 2009, Canadian CEOs actually saw a raise. Every single one of them saw a raise, and the average raise was 20% in total compensation. I'd like to point out three other crucial details. First, the Bank of Canada and U.S. Federal Reserve loan programs, the monies that were taken out, were all paid back by July 2010. Second, the mortgages purchased by CMHC will mature over the next 2 years by 2014. And third, in retrospect, there was little likelihood of aid providers losing money in these programs. As with U.S. bailout programs, the U.S. TARP program, and the auto bailouts, monies were paid back with interest. In Canada, we call these programs backstops, whereas in the U.S., they call them bailouts. In Canada, we still do not know the secret values behind how much each bank borrowed, but in the U.S., those values are public. It is time for the government to come clean on exactly how much each bank received, when they received the money, and what they put up as collateral. A healthy and resilient banking sector cannot operate behind the shroud of secrecy. The details of the massive taxpayer support for Canada's big banks should be made public in the interests of transparency and accountability. Efforts should be made to determine why some banks required so much more support, particularly on a relative perspective, than others. And the results of this exercise should be used to strengthen banking regulation so that the need for this type of support is lessened or eliminated in the future. In summary, the banks took $114 billion at peak, from not one country but two, from not one program but three, for not a limited period of time but an extended one, and that support at points was worth more than the value of the banks themselves. Thank you. I'd be happy to take your questions in English et en français.
Je sais que vous avez expliqué là, que vous avez dû baser votre...
Alas, I don't speak French. Lovely language, though. And now we're going to move on to... and I love the French attitude as well. They're like, you know, power to the people. I like the French. So, this is now Denis Kucinich. He's a former US congressman and is being interviewed by Democracy Now! Over in Sweden. And this article is entitled Denis Kucinich on the Iraq Crisis and What the US Can Learn from Sweden's Political Diversity, courtesy of Democracy Now!
And we end today's show with a very familiar voice in U.S. politics, here at the University of Uppsala in Visby, Sweden. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Visby, Sweden, from the largest Swedish island of Gotland, where Almedalen is taking place. That is this mass gathering of tens of thousands of people, of every party debating the issues of the day. Sort of like a political convention in the United States, except all of them together and more. So we're joined by Denis Kucinich. That might surprise some of the people who are listening and watching right now, the former Congress member who lives in Washington right now. What are you doing in Almedalen?
Well, I found out about this amazing event here, and I had to see it for myself. Can you imagine where people of every political persuasion come together in an open space, freely discussing and debating, in a sense of joy, like a festival, and the thinking is very deep, and it's consequential. I believe that what's happening here has the potential to catch on all around the world in terms of improving the level of political dialogue and enabling people to try to find a way to reach a common ground.
Joy in politics, you said?
Yeah, absolutely. There should be. I mean, the fact that we don't have that is a testimony to our disconnecting ourselves from our own hearts, what it is we desire. Life should not be a funeral march to the grave. We should have the capacity for being able to lift up not just public dialogue, but lift up each other in a greater cause of nationhood. And so when you see the kind of internecine conflict that happens in the United States, the partisan divide, the dichotomous thinking, the separation from each other, there's a different thing happening here in Sweden at Almedalen, which is a sense of a common bond as citizens with a common purpose for the nation. And people come together here. And the thing that impresses me is how quickly on the street you can get into the deepest discussions that have consequence. And so that's why, having been here only for 2 days, I've had a chance to meet people from every level of society, decision makers as well as citizens, and there's a sense that things matter in these kind of discussions, which are direct, relatively low-key, non-confrontational, matter-of-fact, and behind it is what animates it is a sense of commitment to each other and to the nation.
Proportional representation is really the name of the game in Sweden, right? Anyone who gets, I think it's 4% of the vote can be represented in Parliament. Can you comment on this? It's a growing movement in the United States.
It should happen. So it's really, a step towards democratization, so that points of view that are held in the general populace are not squelched because they don't reach some numerical significance that we call majority. Majority politics are all very interesting, but what's happening in the United States with an increasingly blurring the differences between the two parties. There's a hunger for alternatives, and there's a hunger for those alternatives to find means of inclusion.
And that is the same over this side of the Atlantic. As our guest a couple of weeks ago, David Mulholland, was saying, the political and the financial systems in Britain are very similar to America. That's why I think, that's why I play a lot of clips from America, because there's a lot of good people in America talking about the same issues that affect their lives as affect ours, because this is the new world order.
Inclusion into the process. So certainly, that's one way to do it, and we need to broaden our discussion in America. When you come here and you see so many different political persuasions represented, and our politics back home are monochromatic. I mean, increasingly, it's gray, and you can't really tell the difference. Here you can, but at the same time, there's a common commitment to the nation. We need to awaken those sentiments in America, and one way to do it is proportional representation.
Congressman Kucinich, the issue of Iraq. I mean, for many of the years you were in Congress, this was a battle, not only all over Iraq, but a battle in Congress. What do you feel needs to be done right now?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that the American people were lied to. Our country was taken into war against innocent people, and the consequences have been disastrous. For the people of Iraq, who perhaps had 1 million extra deaths during that period, the destruction of their country, for the people of the United States who saw their own men and women led to their deaths or grave injuries, and at a cost of perhaps anywhere from $3 to $6 billion long term. This thing was a catastrophe. And if we learn anything from our experience in Iraq, it should be that interventionism is not the wave of the future. We need to reassess this whole idea that somehow we have the right to intervene in the affairs of other nations, and we have to put away the pretense that we do it for some higher principle.
And again, the same can be said for our David Cameron's administration wanting to take us into Syria, trying and failing, and trying and succeeding in Libya, and for Tony Blair, the regime change in Iraq.
The fact of the matter is we went after Iraq for oil, and the fact of the matter is that the United States has degraded our role as a great nation by attacking this nation that had no capacity to attack the United States and no intention of doing so, that didn't have anything to do with 9/11, didn't have weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't a mistake, Amy, it was a lie. So what about Iraq today? Iraq today, we have to stop the games that our government is playing. of subterfuge, of duplicity. The double game that's being played in Iraq is a violation of what America should be about. And as we should be honest with people, we should be straightforward in our international policies. But we seem to be constitutionally incapable of doing that. And that's a problem. That's a problem that involves a broad national discussion involving people at every level, because the consequences of our continued interference in the internal affairs of nations is to create blowback, as Chalmers Johnson and others have written, and to create conditions where America will always be at risk in the future of a loss of our ability to be able to meet the needs of our own people and of leading the planet towards destruction. Because this planet that we have, you can talk about global climate change, but war is a form of ecocide. This planet that we have is not guaranteed to us. If we are faithful stewards of the planet, we also have to be mindful of our capacity to create peace, that we cannot imagine that peace will be created of itself. We have to be architects of peace. We have to change our relationships with nations so that America is no longer a nation above nations, but a nation among nations. And I think that if we take that approach, we won't find ourselves trapped in situations where we really violate the basic wisdom that that our founders gave us in saying, beware of foreign entanglements. And we have entangled ourselves willfully, duplicitously, and America is better than that.
Former U.S. Congress member and former presidential candidate Dennis Kucinich, yes, speaking with me here at Almedalen Week on the island of Gotland in Visby, Sweden, where over 25,000 people have come to attend this unique political open-air festival.
And now, moving on, this is moxnews.com. The link is called Arrest of American Double Agent Spy in Germany Has Berlin Demanding Answers.
Officer was allegedly found passing sensitive information to U.S. agents. This adds to the already strained relationship between the two powers since it was discovered the U.S. spied on Chancellor Angela Merkel's phone calls. Al Jazeera's Omar Salah has the story.
This parliamentary committee was investigating U.S. spying on Germany. Now it appears it may itself have been spied on. A 30-year-old employee of Germany's intelligence agency is reported to have been an American double agent, accused of stealing confidential documents and passing them to Washington.
This is a very serious incident. That's why the federal state prosecutor has become involved. Espionage activity for foreign intelligence services isn't something that we treat lightly, but it is a matter for the federal state prosecutor and the investigating Federal Criminal Office now, and it's in very good hands.
The suspect was originally arrested on suspicion of spying for Russia, but he told his interrogators he was working for the U.S. The White House has refused to comment on this latest arrest, but German politicians are outraged.
Wenn sich der Spionageverdacht
If these spying allegations are confirmed, it would be an outrageous attack on the freedom of our parliament and against our democratic institutions overall. There is no justification for this whatsoever.
Should these allegations prove true, it would be a veritable scandal. In constitutional democracies, parliaments control intelligence services. Intelligence services do not control parliaments. So we hope for a quick clarification, and if necessary, severe legal consequences.
This is just the latest, and it puts the U.S.-German ties under further strains. Former NSA contractor Edward Snowden last year revealed Washington was spying on its ally. The revelations include mass surveillance of German citizens, including monitoring Chancellor Angela Merkel's mobile phone. An attempt to create a new intelligence relationship between Germany and the US collapsed in May when Washington refused to rule out spying on its allies. After the Snowden leaks, President Barack Obama ordered a complete review of spying on its allies. But now with these new revelations, the implications could reach beyond Washington and Berlin. Omar Saleh, Al Jazeera.
Interesting. That interventionism just doesn't stop at wars, does it? Now then, let us move on to an article from Breitbart, man who was Andrew Breitbart, his website still goes, they don't know his history, Google it. He said he had some really interesting stuff that could bring down Obama, and then the next day he had a little accident. He's dead now. So, but still a well-established media outlet and well respected in America. Blackmail and silent handovers. How Cameron allows UK powers to keep slipping to Brussels. Watch what he does, not what he says. Even while Prime Minister David Cameron was in the Camerons this week accepting praise for his Eurosceptic backbenchers for the way he stood up for British interests at the European Council on June the 27th, we now know that just a week earlier his ministers had quietly agreed to transfer more British policing and justice powers to the EU institutions. Well, David Cameron attends Bilderberg. Bilderberg admit that they were was intrinsically involved in forming the EU. So they're very pro-EU thing. And, of course, Bilderberg's their agenda is world government. So, again, that's what... Watch what he says, not what he... watch what he does, not what he says. According to The Times, a week before the European Council meeting at which Cameron made what he claimed was a principled stand against the nomination of Jean-Claude Juncker as a new president of the European Commission, Cameron's ministers signed off in Brussels to a list of 35 areas of cooperation, including the notorious European arrest warrant. The Times also claimed that in a revelation certain to enrage Tory Eurosceptics, a leaked document shows that ministers have opened the door to the sharing of DNA records. However, the Times does not have the full story, although it has secured important leaked documents. In fact, the pressure by the EU on Britain to open its DNA database has nothing to do with the Lisbon Treaty opt-outs or what was signed off last month. Instead, EU officials are using blackmail over asylum seekers and immigrants to force the UK to open its national DNA database, which holds confidential information on millions of innocent Britons, to the law enforcement agencies of other member states, even though there is nothing in any treaty which obliges Britain to do so. So, again, Cameron attended Bilderberg in 2013, and they're a very pro-EU organisation. It's all a pro-wrestling. Red Bilderberg puppet versus blue Bilderberg puppet. Bilderberg is pro-Europe, so pro-Europe red puppet versus pro-Europe blue puppet. And the pro-Europe blue puppet must pretend to be anti-Europe. Okay? Because he's aware of just how unpopular EU is. That's what it is. That's what's going on. So, any agreement which would be entirely separate from the handover of powers in the 35 areas of cooperation signed off the week before the European Council, a handover which goes back to the opt-out in the UK secured under Article 10 of Protocol 36 of the 2009 Lisbon Treaty. This protocol enabled the government to decide by May 31st, 2014 whether or not UK should continue to be bound by the 133 police and criminal justice powers which were transferred to EU institutions before the treaty entered into force, or whether it should be exercise its right to opt out of them all. Far from returning powers to Britain, Cameron's ministers have now surrendered powers in 35 areas. This silent transfer of police and justice powers, which Number 10 claimed in a Press Association report was in the national interest. It's in the national interest to give away our national power. Just bend over and take it, Britain. However, the EU historian and blogger Dr. Richard North says the Times is eliding entirely separate matters and confusing the issues. In the matter of access to the DNA database, we are looking at a technical decision to be made by the UK government as to whether to take part in the PRUM Convention. The convention is an intergovernmental treaty, that is, a treaty of countries acting as independent states, not a treaty of the EU signed by 7 European countries and implemented in 2008. It is a treaty on the exchange of police information whereby some EU member states have granted each other rights to their automated DNA analysis files, automated fingerprint identification systems and vehicle registration data. Now the EU has adopted the convention as its own and has asked Britain if it wants to join. Britain has indicated it will delay a decision on the DNA database until December 31st, 2015, 6 months after the next election. According to Dr. North, the bigger issue, though, was, which the Times seems to have missed altogether, is that the colleagues seem to be blackmailing the UK. Until we decide on PRUM, they are refusing access to the Eurodac system. This is a database of fingerprints of applicants who have applied in any member state for asylum, and illegal immigrants who have been picked up within EU member state territories. This database is an essential tool in making the Dublin regulation work. The regulation establishes which member state is responsible for examining applications for asylum. So, read any more for yourself. I've got nothing against Europeans, got nothing against French, German, Spanish. I like them all. What I do think is a bad idea is giving power to people who you can't vote for. Because if you don't like it, you can't vote them out. Okay? So that's why democracy works best at a local level. Love the Europeans, but I also love local democracy. So that's why I'm anti-EU. And it would also help not to give them millions a day as well and spend it on local schools and hospitals as well, to have all this unpopular stuff. I'd rather have my schools and hospitals opened and my maternity ward at Eastbourne DGH reinstated than give millions to the EU commissioners. Call me crazy, but that's the way I like it. And there's nothing racist or xenophobic about that. But also, like, as Tony was saying last week, you know, or I can't remember, it might have been David before the week then, the point is very valid that you go to high streets and everything's corporate, everything's different, you know. It's not like that in all the European countries. I like that. You know, the reason I go to France is because I want to experience France, not I want to experience the same corporations with a French accent. You know, I want to experience the French culture. I want to experience their way of life. Same when I go to Spain or Germany or anything like that. I've been to all these countries. I've liked all my trips. I've liked all my people that I've met. I like their cultures. I like to experience it. I don't want everything homogenised. I want things different. I like it. It's part of the experience. Mail online now. Children aged 8 can now have their own MasterCard. Debit cards can be topped up by parents for their offspring to use. Yep, as Hitler said, get them when they're young. Children as young as 8 offered MasterCards to use in shops or online. New prepaid debit cards are endorsed by TV presenter Davina McCall. Yeah, make it cool for the kids to get that card, and then they're more likely to get in debt when they're older. Once you've got them in debt, yeah, you got them then, don't you? Critics say the cards are simply turning children into mini consumers. Oh, I'm sure that's just a coincidence. 7th of July 2014. This is by Eleanor Harding. Children as young as 8 are being offered celebrity-endorsed MasterCards to use in shops, online or at cash machines. The cards, created by British company Osper, can be topped up by parents with the child's monthly allowance so they can spend it at will. Banks already issue debit cards to anyone over the age of 11, but it is thought this is the first time younger children will be able to use them. TV presenter Davina McCall is endorsing the prepaid debit card on our website after it was launched last week. Now, this dovetails into our previous article. Now, this is from 23rd of October 2013, Christopher Hope. Romanian police start to patrol London streets ahead of lifting of border controls. Romanian police officers are starting to patrol London streets ahead of the lifting of border controls on immigrants from the East European country in 2 months' time. The Metropolitan Police has invited 8 Romanian officers to work with its officers for the next 2 years after a successful programme pilot last year. Under the arrangement, officers from the Met will be able to have access to the National Police computer in Romania to check on suspects. The officers have no policing powers to arrest suspects in the UK, but will be able to share intelligence with their British counterparts. Now, that is crucial. The police officers have no policing powers. That is a good thing. Not because I've got anything against Romanians, not because I've got anything against Romanian police officers, but you have... I don't have anything against police officers at all. Most of them are very nice people. We've had guests of them on this show before. But you must have... If they swear an oath... Basically, when a policeman comes, he swears an oath, and he swears an oath to the Queen, I believe. But, I mean, really, I think that should be an oath to the taxpayer. But basically, you swear an allegiance to that nation. The nation of taxpayers that pays your wages, and so you need to be accountable to them. So that's why you must never have international police. You must, just for the exact same argument, you mustn't have international law. You should have, I would love to see the banning of depleted uranium used in wars. I mean, it's used by America primarily in Iraq and other such places, I believe. And but you should never have an international law that says, right, we are the almighty world government and you must do as we say. What you can do is you can bring other nations to say, hey, it's a really bad idea to use depleted uranium, and I know that it probably will have effects in your other countries as well, so that's why there is the argument for international law, because that depleted uranium is going to get through the soil and into the atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. So I get that is one example where international law might be good, but I still wouldn't be for it because it would set a dangerous precedent, because after that other things would come. Oh, just another little thing. Oh, just another little thing. You know the way the establishment works. And besides, I mean, it's, that's something that people can, each nation should be able to take to itself, and I think that encourages it great. Also, if you got this international law passing it, people basically go, oh, just leave it to international people. No, you need to get people involved at the local level, and you need each and every country, people in each and every country, and then you say to all their individual parliaments one together, we want to deplete uranium. That's the way international law should work. You should be able to educate and inform public. I have faith in everyone on this planet that if they're informed, they can make the right decisions. Unless they're Tim Bilderberg, obviously, I've got no faith in those type of people. But normal people, people that don't go to Bohemian Grove and practice in the cremation of care ceremony, people that don't make 114 files on paedophilia disappear, those sorts of people, the people that don't engage in those activities, I have faith in them that they can all create a better world, and to do that with their own little systems of democracy. And they're all going to have their own cultures and differences and laws, and then you've got like a wonderful choice, haven't you? If like you didn't like one country's laws, you move to another. The one that is the wonder of life. Variety is the spice of life. So that's why I'm not for a one rule fits all world, even though in some circumstances I can see that it's better, and that's why I'm not against international police forces. You must have anyone that can arrest a citizen from that country must be accountable to the citizens of that country, and that's why that line there is key. The officers have no policing powers. Make certain it stays that way, Britain. Again, nothing against the Romanians or their police force, just for the arguments I've just described. Now, moving on, we have police forces hand 470,000 to group dubbed the left-wing Freemasons for training courses. This is from the Daily Mail. This is by Vanessa Allen, 7th of July 2014. So, common purpose officers training courses to police for £5,000 per week. Organisation described as left-wing Freemasons by Tory MP. Trustee is co-founder of the group behind Hacked Off press campaign. Met Police, who are leading phone hacking probe, spent £60,000 on training. Police forces have spent almost £500,000 on training courses run by a group dubbed a left-wing Freemasons. But remember, this was dubbed by only one person. I'm not defending or anything like that, but, always be wary of headlines. Read more into it, Metropolitan Police, which is leading investigations into alleged corruption and phone hacking at newspapers, has spent £60,000 on their leadership courses. So, now then, just to tie up on our last article before I say goodbye. Actually, I think that's time. So, thank you ever so much for joining us. Coming up on... Well, we're going to take a break now for the summer. In fact, this might have been gone on after it. But if you're getting withdrawal symptoms from my moaning, you can always check out beyondthenews.co.uk. And you can click on the news link and that'll give all the articles, and I'll be keeping that updated throughout August as well, and then I'll be back here in September, and we hope you are too. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jim Grant Comedy. Thank you very much. Good night.